A woman walked into prison to visit her husband. She never walked out. Her name was Stephanie Dowells, 62 years old, a mother, a grandmother, a woman who believed in second chances. On November 13th, 2024, she entered Mule Creek State Prison to see the man she married, a man the world already knew as a killer, a man who had taken 4 lives in cold blood 3 decades earlier. This was supposed to be a controlled environment, guards, cameras, rules, but none of that mattered. Because before the sun rose that morning, Stephanie Dowells was dead, strangled, by the same hands that had murdered before, in a place where she should have been safe, by a man who was already locked away for life. How did this happen? Why was a convicted quadruple murderer allowed to be alone with anyone, let alone his own wife? And why, after everything he'd done, did the system fail her one last time? This is the story that shouldn't exist. Welcome to True Crime Files, a place where we examine the most disturbing cases, piece by piece, where no detail is overlooked and no stone is left unturned. Today's story is different from the rest. It's not about a killer on the loose, not about a crime that went unsolved. This time, the murderer was already behind bars. A man who had taken 4 lives. A man serving a life sentence with no chance of parole. And yet, he killed again, inside the very walls meant to contain him. This is a case that defies logic. A failure of the system. A tragedy that should never have happened. Asterisk, if you're ready to uncover the truth, make sure you're subscribed. Because what comes next will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about justice. To understand what happened that night in Mule Creek State Prison, we must first go back to 1993, back to the crimes that should have been David Brinson's last. The records show 4 lives ended by his hand, for names that would never be spoken by their families again, for ordinary people who crossed paths with a man capable of extraordinary violence. The details are stark. Court documents describe methodical actions, a complete absence of remorse. When arrested, Brinson showed no emotion, just cold acceptance of what he'd done. The sentencing hearing lasted less than an hour. The evidence was overwhelming. The judge called it one of the most clear-cut cases of premeditated violence he'd ever seen. Life without parole. No possibility of release. The end. But it wasn't the end. Because 31 years later, in a prison visiting room, David Brinson would kill again. The question isn't just how this happened, but why it was allowed to happen. Why a man with his history was permitted private contact with anyone. Why the system designed to protect failed at the most basic level. 4 victims became 5. A life sentence took on new meaning. And a wife who believed in redemption paid the ultimate price for that belief. This is where the real story begins. November 13th, 2024. A Thursday like any other at Mule Creek State Prison. The morning shift had just begun. Guards made their rounds. Inmates lined up for breakfast. And at exactly 8:47 a.m., Stephanie Dowells signed the visitor logbook. She brought nothing with her but a Bible, the same one she brought on every visit for the past 7 years. The guards knew her by name. They'd watched her make this walk every month without fail, always with that same determined look in her eyes. This was what they called a family visit. More private than regular visitation. More intimate. They gave them a small room with a table, 2 chairs, and a telephone for emergencies. They said it helped maintain family bonds. They said it was safe. What happened next took less than 12 minutes. At 9:03 a.m., the emergency phone in the visiting room rang. When the guard answered, he heard a calm voice say, "I need to report a death." Not a scream, not a cry for help, just a simple statement of fact. The responding officers found Stephanie Dowells on the floor. Her Bible lay open beside her. David Brinson sat quietly in his chair, hands folded on the table, waiting exactly where they'd left him. Later, the coroner would note the precise placement of fingerprints around her neck, the lack of defensive wounds, the terrible, quiet efficiency of it all. But the most disturbing detail? The timing. The visit was scheduled to last 4 hours. Brinson could have waited until much later. But he didn't. He chose to do it early, when the guards were still close, when he knew they would come running at the first sign of trouble. This wasn't an act of passion. This wasn't a loss of control. This was something else entirely. A calculated decision made by a man who had spent 31 years thinking about exactly what he was capable of. And the most chilling question of all, why her? Why now? Why, after all these years of visits, did he finally decide to cross that line? Armin Torres heard the news from a prison official at 11:37 a.m. His mother was dead. The call lasted 42 seconds. When he hung up, his first thought wasn't grief. It wasn't shock. It was rage. How? That's the word he kept repeating when we spoke. Not why. Not when. How? How could they leave her alone with him? How could the system fail this completely? The Torres family had known about Brinson's past. Stephanie had told them everything before she married him. They'd objected, pleaded with her, but she believed people could change, even people who had done terrible things. Now they're left with impossible questions. Why was a man convicted of 4 murders allowed private visits at all? Where were the guards during those critical minutes? How many warning signs were ignored because Brinson had been well-behaved for years? The prison's official statement called this a tragic anomaly. They pointed to 30 years without incident. They emphasized the importance of maintaining family connections. But none of that explains why a known killer was left unwatched with his victim. Armin keeps returning to one detail. The phone. That emergency phone Brinson used to call the guards. His mother could have reached it too. She was right there. But she never got the chance. The family has filed a wrongful death lawsuit. Not for the money. They say they're doing it for the next woman, the next family visit, the next prisoner who might decide today's the day. Because here's the terrible truth they've learned. When the system assumes a killer won't kill again, it's not protecting anyone. It's just waiting for the next tragedy to happen. And waiting, as we've seen, can be the most dangerous thing of all. Let's pause here, because this isn't just about what happened to Stephanie Dowells. This forces us to ask much harder questions about our prison system. On one side, the psychologists and reformers, they'll tell you these private visits maintain crucial human connections, that isolating prisoners completely makes them more dangerous, that even violent offenders need hope to rehabilitate. On the other side, the facts of this case, a man who took 5 lives, 4 before prison, 1 during, all with the same methodical precision, all with years to plan. So we have to ask, at what point does rehabilitation become an unacceptable risk? When does someone's past behavior tell us enough about their future? I want to hear where you stand on this. After hearing Stephanie's story, do you believe violent offenders should keep these visitation privileges? Or has this case changed your mind? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Not just yes or no, but why? Because conversations like this might be what prevents the next tragedy. Let's look at the facts one more time. A woman walked into prison believing she was safe. A man who had killed before killed again. A system designed to protect failed at its most basic function. Stephanie Dowells should be alive today. Her grandchildren should still hear her voice. Her family should still feel her love. Instead, they're left with questions that may never be answered. Questions about justice, about safety, about how we treat those who have done the unthinkable. If this story has affected you, here's what you can do. Share it. Talk about it. Demand accountability. Because stories like this shouldn't end here. And if you want to understand more cases like this, cases where the system failed in ways you wouldn't believe, then subscribe now. Because the truth, the real truth, is always worth hearing.